Hi, I'm Jim Bergen, pastor at Holy Cross Lutheran Church in Houston, Texas, and this is a sermon for Christ the King Sunday, the last Sunday of the church year before we move into Advent. This is the King of the Jews. He is the King of truth. He is the King of all reality. Crucifixions were gruesome entertainment for some, a nasty but regular job for soldiers, pointed reminders of the consequences of disagreeing with the empire for others. To make it perfectly clear what witnesses were not to do, the charges were listed on a placard hung around the neck of the crucified person or nailed to the cross. Pilate thought Jesus was innocent. So did his wife. The hassles that he's getting from the Sanhedrin about Jesus didn't really need to become a Roman problem, but it's starting to look like that's what's happening. Another rotten day at the office. He sent Jesus to his death with a sign, mocking the Sanhedrin. What do you want to bet that Tiberius Caesar did not get to read that sign, being in Rome and all, wisely avoiding filthy Passover pilgrim crowds? This is the King of the Jews. Had Tiberius read it, would Pilate have to say something like, "Oops, just kidding here, a little joke at the expense of those Passover animals"? I bet you dollars to donuts, Pilate was counting on the fact that Caesar would never hear about this one. And if it did, it might go down on the plus side for Pilate, efficiently handling a minor local uprising that needn't concern anyone important. But no matter how ironic or sardonic or sarcastic or bombastic it was, one does not kid around with the empire and its head of state. The king business is viciously powerful, cruelly vengeful, and vulnerably fragile. The emperor is king of millions of people, and each one of them thinks they could do a better job. You don't kid around in a surveillance society. Even children in our world of the internet know that. You are being watched because the king is insecure. This is the King of the Jews. Is insurrection. It really is treason. It is blasphemy, since the Caesars were considered to be God, divine beings. Get out of here, Pilate. You did not really say that in black and white for everyone to read? Trilingually? In Greek, the language of culture, economics, world trade, and entertainment. In Latin, the language of government, law, administration, and the military. In Hebrew, the language of the local indigenous majority religion, Judaism, and its many parties, Pharisees, Sadducees, Samaritans, Essenes, Sicarii, Zealots, a list as long as your gender choices on the web. Hard to keep track of it all. Clearly, Pilate needs to take some serious diversity training classes to avoid political incorrectness. Pilate, however, I believe was equally offensive to all, and so kind of okay with it. He was either very brave or sick and tired of all the controversy. Of course, the Sanhedrin's upset. The sign made them look like fools, and Pilate was not going to change a word of it, even though he'd likely be punished if Caesar found out about it. Hundreds of thousands of pilgrims were going to walk by this crucifixion and read this sign on their way to Jerusalem for the Passover. At the trial, Pilate's only concern was his one question to Jesus: "Are you the King of the Jews?" Jesus gives Pilate a direct order. You say so. Pilate is obedient to Jesus when he says so on the sign that everybody can read. This is the King of the Jews. Pilate said so, and he's the governor of Judea. Luke is a king of double entendre, that's for sure. Mockery combines with serious confession of faith. The Sanhedrin have no choice but to lead the mocking on Golgotha now to avoid repercussions. Pilgrim rebellions, maybe? Roman retaliations. For their participation in an unclean crucifixion, they will forfeit their roles in the great Passover that year. Essentially, they will have excommunicated themselves, cut off their nose despite their face. As per usual in Luke's gospel, the first people and forces of evil to recognize Jesus as the King of the universe are opponents, demons, the unclean, and the outcast. Even the mockery is a testimony to his power. Even his worst detractors pretty much agreed he saved others. So now it's time to save himself and take over everything. But precisely because he's the King of Kings, he can't or won't save himself. It's a replay of the temptation in the wilderness in Luke 4, verses 5 through 8, where he will be named King of the world if he just worships the devil. It's not going to happen. He is the King of all. Jesus won't let go of us to save himself. I heard about a boy that was swimming and his mom saw an alligator surface near him. She ran into the water and jammed her thumb in the gator's eye and dragged her boy out of the gator's mouth to safety. She won that tug of war, but he had some stitches. His friends were visiting him in the hospital to admire all those stitches. He was more proud of the fact that he was solid, black and blue, from his shoulders to his wet wrists. He said, "My mom did that. She wouldn't let go." Christ the King is our King of Kings. But he's crucified, a criminal. His crime announced for the whole world to see. This is the King of the Jews. Written in the three power languages of the first century. Pilate proclaimed Jesus King of the Jews. What if Pilate was preaching Christianity's first sermon? What if Pilate was stating the first Christian creed? What if Pilate, who was very concerned about truth and reality, was proclaiming truth as accurately as he could? What if Pilate was placing himself at risk from Caesar and being okay with that gamble? What if Pilate was making a confession of who he really thought was the true King of the universe, when loyalty oaths to Caesar and other rules determined whether you lived or died? It is wonderful, beautiful language that the New Testament people use to tell us of what happened to them because of Christ the King. Lives were turned around. It was salvation. Slaves said they were kings and priests. How audacious is that? People believed they were in God's kingdom, and he would not let them go. They showed that they were not victims, and to live is Christ. To die is gain. The King who wouldn't save himself is the King of the universe. Christ the King. Amen.